The Pokemon World Championships is the biggest event on a competitive calendar, attracting the best players from around the globe to compete for a chance to become the world champion. Now, World Champion probably isn't in the cards for me, but I would at least like to qualify. To obtain a Worlds invite, players spend the competitive season competing at different Pokemon tournaments of various sizes, from League Challenges, which are small local events with up to 15 championship points being awarded to the winner, all the way up to international events. The biggest non-invite based tournaments with massive cash prize pools, large championship point payouts, and guaranteed Worlds invites for the top 4 finishers. Just below international championships are regional events. In Europe, we get around 7 of these a season, with 2 extra slightly smaller special events, which are functionally the same thing, but they just don't have cash prizing available. Doing well at a regional will get you a good chunk of points towards your Worlds invite, and can also net you quite a lot of money for doing well, so they usually attract quite a lot of competitors, anywhere from 1,500 up to over 2,000 players in attendance. By the end of the season, the top 135 players in Europe will receive an invite to Worlds, so accumulating as many points as possible through doing well at these kind of events is super important, which is why I'm entering the Birmingham Regional Championships. This event is going to be massive, with over 2,300 players competing, so it's probably a good idea to start preparing. Okay, let's talk about the metagame. Coming off of Toronto Regionals, Golden Go didn't have the best showing, with only 1 making top cut, but we'll still probably see a lot of play. Charizard also didn't perform too great, but it's still a big threat in the meta, and Grimmsnarl came out of nowhere to take 2 spots in top cut. So these are the main decks that we're going to want to be ready for. Looking at all of these decks, I think I found an archetype with a pretty incredible matchup spread. Zoroark EX. Zoroark has been flying under the radar for a while now, with Liam Halliburton getting top 32 in Toronto and 1 more in top 64, but on paper it seems like a pretty incredible deck. The main appeal of Zoroark is the incredible draw engine we can take advantage of in Zoroark EX. Zoroark's trade lets you discard a card from your hand, then draw 2, which gives you an incredible amount of dig when multiple Zoroarks are on the board. Its attack Night Joker lets you copy an attack from one of your benched ends Pokemon, which means Zoroark will be hitting you for a steady 170 damage every turn with Virtuous Flame, or double all damage on Zoroark to deal that back to the opponent with Powerful Rage. Zoroark's Dark typing also means we can one-shot a Gardevoir EX, but ironically our Gardevoir matchup can still be pretty unfavoured based on how we build the list. With such a strong draw engine, the deck is able to play a heavy amount of tech cards, so let's look at the deck list I'm playing to Birmingham. This was my rough skeleton for the deck coming into the event. These 49 cards are the ones that, in my opinion, are absolutely necessary for the deck's core to function. Using Lily for early draw lets you see an incredible amount of cards early on in the game, letting you raw draw your Zoroarks pretty early on, and multiple TM Evos is going to let you fully establish your board as early as turn 1 going second. 2 Air Balloon might look a bit interesting, but so many of our core Pokemon have a retreat cost of 2 that having a second copy is absolutely paramount. I have so many games where you have to use both Air Balloon, and being able to conserve energy early on, especially when we don't have an incredibly strong energy acceleration engine, is super convenient. The format is littered with normal type draw engines, with the main examples being Noctowls, Pidgeots, and Kangaskhan cards. So Team Rocket's Watchtower makes for a super useful card, giving us a super disruptive play against Noctowl and Pidgeot decks through Watchtower paired with a late game Ino to a 2 or 3 card hand. Powpad might stick out a little, but when you discard so many resources through trade, it's super useful to increase the concentration of good cards in your deck later on in the game, as well as letting you play up to 5 boss in a game. Finally, Monkey Dory seems like a pretty obvious inclusion in pretty much any deck playing Dark Energy. The Pokemon enables some pretty creative multi-price turns and is super good against evolving decks like Zarda and Polt in my opinion. Alright, with the skeleton covered, let's bulk up the list with a few techs and consistency options. The main problem with the skeleton is our Dengo matchup, which is super unfavoured, to the point where it's pretty much an auto loss if you don't commit at least a few deck slots to beating the matchup. You have a few options to do this though. Swapping to Hero's Cape and Mega Absol is fine, but the matchup is still pretty terrible, and this kind of build only really works if you swap to a Sarano build, which I'm not prepared to do. Damtam is probably the most obvious tech, being a Fire-type single prizer that can one-shot Dengos easily, but you have to commit so much deck space to the package, and the matchup is still unfavoured due to how clunky Damtam can be to set up. The third, and in my opinion the best option to beat Dengo, comes through Toedscruel.
Toad is going to block all cards in your opponent's discard from being sent back to hand, which renders all of their superior energy retrievals and night stretchers virtually useless. We're going to spend 4 whole deck slots on adding a 2/2 Toad line and a third TM Evo, which is going to boost consistency and let us turbo into Toad one more time per game. And yes, the matchup really is bad enough to justify 7 whole deck slots being committed primarily to beating it. Dengo is the big problem we have to solve for the tournament, but aside from Goldengo, there's another pretty big problem: Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon. If we go back to our list so far, we have effectively no way to generate any meaningful damage onto Cornerstone, with our only options being 20 damage on Zoruas and 10 on Baby Toads, as well as Adrenabrain if possible. There are a few options to taking out Cornerstone. Hooper EX is pretty good and helps into the Absol matchup. Okidogi can deal with Cornerstone pretty nicely and also raises our potential damage output to 260, which cleanly takes out Fez, and whilst both of these options are fine, Okidogi incentivizes you to play Petulant and more energy, and Hooper relies on your opponent dropping 5 or more energy on the board in one go. Phantasmal Flames give us a new answer to the Ogerpon though, in the form of Mega Lopunny. Lopunny has a tanky 330 HP, which means you aren't going to get bodied by Blood Moon Ursaluna as easily against Absol Box. 230 damage for just 1 energy means we also don't have to commit many resources to our Wall Breaker, and it can be charged in just a single turn. Whilst this Pokemon is a stage 1 though, remember that we run 3 copies of TM Evo, so we can easily search out the Lopunny early on in the game. The card also has pretty strong synergy with Air Balloon, since Gale Thrust's only condition is that the bunny needs to have been moved from the bench that turn. Now that we have our Dengo and Cornerstone techs, we need to decide on some general consistency cards to fill the last 4 deck slots. Only 1 PP up isn't great, since if you fall behind early on in energy attachments with the deck, you can lose a lot of tempo and get outpaced, effectively losing the game on the spot. We could run a second copy of PP up, but instead we're going to play a single copy of Energy Switch. This is going to let you more comfortably Evo off a Reshiram or Toad if that's your lead, knowing the energy can easily be moved later on, and it also lets you do some pretty cool double Munkidori combo plays, or even turbo into a Munkidori and Lopunny in the same turn. In hindsight, I didn't actually get too much value out of the E-Switch, and I probably would have preferred it as a PP up, but I think that's more of a skill issue on my end if I'm honest. Looking at the predicted format for Birmingham, Polt and Zard are set to be super popular picks, and looking back on the event, Dusknoir decks accounted for about a quarter of the room. The night before the event, I was running through a few key matchups, and I realised that I was really struggling with the Dragapult matchup. Because of this, and the super high play rates of Charizard, we're going to add in a side up to the list. Charizard and Dragapult are already slightly favoured, despite what Limitless Labs will tell you, but being able to boost our matchups even more by forcing Zard to find the extra combo piece of Klefki and Jet, whilst walling Dragapult out of their dusks for pretty much the entire game should really help over the course of the whole tournament. With 2 deck slots left, we're going to throw in some extra generic consistency. Pokegear is a super nice card, but gets the most value when you play one-off supporters like Arven, Eri or Xerosic, which we don't need here, and a second PP up or Countercatcher would be nice, but one of each is still playable if you really think things through when you use them to get the most value possible. The main problems I found was starting with pretty mid hands, whiffing Ali Poffin, and getting walled out of the game by Budew and Frillish, and sometimes also whiffing Reshiram during important turns in the mid game. We're going to commit the last 2 deck slots to adding a second Artisan and a Cleffa. Artisan is going to be an extra way to search out your Zoruas, and lets us grab Artisan more consistently if we start World Secret Box and prize one. It's also really nice to have against Dragapult, especially when you get item locked early, which is almost always. In addition, it's really nice to have against Goldengo to chain Toads a lot easier, although they will usually put it in play if you don't. Cleffa is just generally really nice to have. You might notice that I'm not playing Fez and Dippity, and so if you start with a dead hand and don't have the resources to get a good setup, Cleffa can get you back into the game. The night before Birmingham, after running a final few games for the evening, I locked in this 60, ready to hopefully make a good run tomorrow.
Only 3% of people who watch my videos are actually subscribing. This video took quite a long time to produce, as you can probably tell, since Birmingham was literally like 2 whole months ago. So if you guys are enjoying the video, feel free to like the video to let the algorithm know you like this kind of content, and subscribe to get recommended more of these videos when I eventually upload. Okay, thanks, back to the video. When I sat down for round 1, my opponent's shirt had an EV box deck list on the front, so when he won the coin flip and chose to go first, it was no surprise to see him flip an Eevee. Flareon should be a pretty good matchup, although it wasn't one I had much experience testing against. If I fell behind on energy attachments too much, it could prove a bit difficult, but Aino watched how a Countercatcher and Lopunny can all be comboed together to try pull back into the game if that happens. He gets a pretty solid start, getting out his Owd and a Pidgey as well as an attachment before passing things over. I find my Poffin and a Lily early to get out 3 Zoruas, one of which came from the lead, and a Baneri as well as a Balloon and Cleffa to draw 7. Notably though, there was no energy found on turn 1, so there was still room for improvement from my first turn. My opponent finds a Flareon, then rips Cyrano for
Leafeon, Fez and Blood Moon. They evolved the benched Eevee into Leafeon, drop an area 0 for the Fez and Burning Charge to start setting up their Leafeon. I promote up as a Rua and get out my 2 Zoroarks, finding an energy but no PP up to swing. I'm left just passing things over with a Zoro in the active, which my opponent capitalizes on by taking a quick knockout to go down to 4, getting both Flareon and Leafeon ready to OHKO a Zoroark, with Flareon holding Fire, Water, Lightning for Carnelian, and Leafeon holding Grass, Fire, Water for Moss Agate. Drawing into an energy off trade lets me finally swing into the Flareon for 170, whilst getting out a fresh Zoro on the bench, since as of right now I only have 2 Zoroarks around, with one about to get knocked out with Carnelian. My opponent doesn't overcomplicate things and just knocks out my Zoroark with Carnelian, at which point I'm ready to try and make my comeback play. After re-establishing a second Zoroark, I drop the Watchtower, attach to Boneria and evolve into a Lopunny, then rip an Iono to give my opponent just a 2-card hand. I would have liked a Countercatcher to take out the Fez with Lopunny, but beggars can't be choosers, and Lopunny takes out the Flareon. My opponent promotes Pidgeot, draws for turn, and without even using Flip the Script, drops the instant Gravity Mountain to counter my Watchtower, quick searching for a boss to Moss Agate my bench Zoroark and take the game. Not a great start to the day, but we still have half an hour to try pull it back. I go second into game 2, and my opponent finds Fan Rotom for Eevee, Hoothoot and Pidgey, but not much else. I draw for turn with a Zoro in the active spot, bench a second Zoro in hand, and pass. There's nothing going on for me. My opponent top decks a Wellspring and attaches a Crystal from hand, then drops the Noctowl to find Crispin and Nestball for Latias, getting a turn 2 Torrential Pump to board wipe me. It's really not fun to lose a set like this, and I'm not too happy with how I drew in either of the 2 games, but with 7 rounds left in the day, there's still plenty of time to make something happen. Round 2 is called and I win the coin flip, getting to go second. The round starts and my opponent flips over a Charcadet. Brilliant. I have Cerulege down as an auto loss because of how quickly they can reach board states with multiple Cerulege established and at least 13 energy in the discard, one-shotting all of your Zoroarks. In game 1 I tried to go for Toad aggressively, but similarly to round 1, I was put on the back foot for energy almost immediately, needing to burn an energy to get into Cleffa from the Toad School lead. After my opponent takes a knockout with Solrock onto one of my 2 Zoruas, getting 5 energy in the discards, I go back into Cleffa, evolve into Zoroark and Toad School, bench another 2 Zoras and Grasping Draw for a second time. My opponent doesn't have much to do, and just Lunar Cycles, evolves some Ceruleges and attaches to establish his second of the game, then uses Solrock to take another prize. Now that I have Zoroark and a nice 7-card hand plus top deck, I evolve into another 2 Zoroarks, get a manual attached to the active, and PP up onto a bench Zoroark, taking out his Solrock to go down to 5 prizes. My opponent rips a Research from their Fez, dropping 5 energy to get to 11 in total, then Ultra Balls away another 2 to reach 13 in the discard, which is the perfect number to take out Zoroark. I can't see how I'm going to take 5 prizes on his board and scoop to go into game 2. It's probably worth noting that my Boneria was prized, otherwise I would have made an effort to establish it and try to break through his board with Lopunny Iono, but no dice unfortunately. Game 2 plays out very similarly. I get down an early Toad, but this time I actually get the opportunity to put some energy in play early. By turn 3 though, my opponent already has 13 energy in the discard, 2 Cerulege established and ready, and 1 more with no energy. Even though he whiffed early KOs with Solrock, I don't see a way into this game at the time. In hindsight, I probably could have at least tried to make something work with Iono Lopunny, but if I'm honest, I didn't really feel like trying in such a cooked matchup, so I scooped early. Starting off at 0-2 felt terrible. From this point on, I couldn't afford a single loss for 6 rounds straight. I needed to go at minimum 5-0-1 for day 2, which felt like a Herculean task considering I have to do it from the lower tables. Generally Zoroark is very strong against the top 6 decks or so. This meant I want to see Zards, Dengos, Polts and potentially Guardies, but it can really struggle against some of the lesser played, more fringe decks that you might see on the middle or lower tables. Even though I felt really bad about how things started, I decided to go grab some food early and keep playing it out to see what happens. I sit down for round 3, silently begging for something meta. I felt pretty confident into pretty much all of the top 10 decks or so in format, so as long as I don't get, I don't know, something like another Cerulege, I would be happy. Let's not be stupid though, Cerulege is 3% of the room, there's no way I could possibly hit another one. The round starts, and my opponent flips over a Charcadet. Brilliant. However, for the first time this tournament, I get to see a hand that I'm actually comfortable playing the game with. We get a double Evo onto Zoroarks on turn 1 going second, and after he takes a knockout onto the active Zorua with Solrock, I take the opportunity to capitalize on the fact that he has just 4 energy in the discard, bossing up the only Cerulege with energy, evolving into a Toad Scroll, and using a PP up to let me reach for 170 damage. He's unable to get enough energy in the discard to take a meaningful knockout, and so he just jets onto the Solrock and passes, not giving me any monkey damage to work with.
I think it would have been better for him to hit me for 70 since the monkey damage doesn't really help me that much, but since he could see a Buneri on the bench, that could start closing in on Okos if I got to shift damage with monkey over the course of 2 turns. It's an understandable decision. I take a knockout into the Sorok in front of me, putting him up to 6 energy in the bin, but my opponent is unable to find a way to reach for knockouts and decides to just punch me with a damaged Ceruledge for 150. I shift 30 onto a bench Ceruledge with Legacy, which he just detached, and take a knockout into the active Ceruledge, going down to 3. My opponent doesn't have much to do, finding a Lunar Cycle but struggling to do much else. Toad School definitely helped here because he almost played a Night Stretcher under Toad until I reminded him that the Toad was in play. Regardless, he knocks out my Zoroark going down to 3, and I decide it's time to play for the game. I rip an Iono to 3 cards each, attach my energy to the active Zoroark and swing into him for 230 with Lopunny, leaving his Ceruledge with just 10 health left. He chooses not to swing, which was a good play considering I could just monkey to the active Ceruledge, nullifying the legacy energy, then KO whatever he sends up for the game, and instead he just passes the turn over to me. I pivot into Zoroark and take a knockout, going down to 2 prizes left with not much to do, whilst eyeing down the bench Squawkabilly for game next turn. My opponent though immediately top decks the Turo, which he needs to remove the Squawk from play, and leaves a Lunatone in the active before passing things over. I boss down his lone Charcadet, looking to all but guarantee game, and knock it out to go down to 1 prize, before my opponent top decks a Research immediately after. He can't find any way back into the game, and just concedes, revealing the Fez hiding in his prizes. Winning a game in this matchup gives me some confidence, but with 25 minutes left on the clock, there's still a lot that can go wrong. In game 2, I get a much weaker start, whilst his is much stronger. By turn 3, 2 Ceruledge are out with energy established and 10 energy are in the discard. I'm already behind on attachments to make things even worse. He gets 3 easy prizes early on, 1 from Solrock into a baby Toad that I left in the active, and 2 from Solrock into Zoruas that I send up as sacrifices to try get enough energy down onto the board. I shove a Zoroark up to take out the Solrock and go down to 5, but he responds quickly with 13 energy in the discards and a quick knockout, whilst also getting Fez down onto the board. I get to Iono him to 1 though, punching 230 into the active Ceruledge with Lopunny, but of course he draws into the Research off Iono to 1 and a top deck, before jetting into another Ceruledge, retreating 2 to get down to 15 in discard and taking game, just as time is called. At least we're not quite out of day 2 contention yet, at 0 wins, 2 losses and a tie, but now I need to win 5 rounds straight to make it into day 2. It looks pretty bad right now, but I wouldn't be making a video on the tournament if the run just ended here. Going into round 4, we finally get to play against something meta. My opponent is playing Goldengo, which is a nice break from the Ceruledges, and a matchup which I actually feel pretty good into. My opponent takes a decently slow start in game 1, dropping 3 energy across 3 turns early on through Lunar Cycles, whilst somehow not being able to take a single prize with Solrock. I used my first TM Evo of the game to evolve into a Toedscruel with 1 baby Toad on the bench, as one of the big Toads is in prizes. By the way, it's probably worth mentioning that I'm going to refer to Toedscruel and Toadschool as Big Toad and Little Toad respectively. It should make things easier to follow because of how similar their names are. Back to the game, I initiate the prize race with a knockout into the active Lunatone, going down 5 prizes to 6. And my opponent responds with a boss KO onto Big Toad, going down to 6 energy in the discard and 1 in play, which leaves 4 left in total. I super rob back the 1/1 Toad and use another technical machine evolution to instantly re-establish it, and my opponent is already unable to take a knockout onto the Toad thanks to super rod being prized and 1 more overly ambitious Lunar Cycle, so he scoops pretty early on. In game 2, I lead with a Monkey Dory going first and instantly draw, attach and pass. There was a second Monkey Dory in hand, but ultimately I decided not to bench it, since, I mean, surely there's no world where my lone Monkey Dory gets donked, right? My opponent has a Solrock as their lead, drops a Power Pro from hand, rips the Arven for a Gong and a Vitband, gongs into the Lunatone, attaches for turn, attaches the Vitband, and on their first turn, they knock out my active Monkey Dory, taking a quick game 2. Things don't get much better, as going into game 3, I realised I've prized one of my baby Toads, and I made the mistake of burning my first TM Evo way too aggressively, not setting up a big Toad. My opponent does their best to aggressively target the Toad down, and takes it out to go down to 5 prizes left, with 4 energy in the discard. 2 from the Make It Rain, 1 from the Lunar Cycle, and 1 on board, which should, in theory, leave at most 7 energy left. For some reason though, after I evoed back into the Toad, my opponent is already trying to establish Lopunny, using Artisan for Buneri and just passing it over. I don't want to give him a way back into this game, so I boss down the Buneri early, capitalizing on him not using a TM Evo, and my opponent quickly concedes, showing me 4 energy stuck in the discard. There was maybe a line for him to try Super Rod back the Buneri and TM Evo, but a win is a win, and I won't complain. In round 5, my opponent was yet again playing Goldengo, and after my first turn consisting of a Buddy Poffin and an energy attachment for turn, as well as a Lily for the follow-up turn in hand, my opponent finds Arvin for a Poffin, getting out 3 Gimmigles, but something is off. Despite the Arvin for turn, there is no Lunar Rocks on board. You would expect that with how much Pokemon Search that Goldengo plays, they would pretty consistently find at least one of the rocks on turn 1, right? I mean, is she even playing the rocks? I take a pretty slow turn, getting another energy onto the boards and getting out a Baby Toad. My opponent gets to evolve into Dengos and plays down a Fire Breather. Fire Breather bags 7 energy, with 6 of them going straight to the bin for a Zoroark knockout. After establishing Big Toad and swinging for 170, my opponent finds a boss to take out the first Big Toad of the game, but a TM Evo brings it right back. My opponent realizes what I'm trying to do and benches a Charcadet, because of course I'm playing against yet another Ceruledge deck. I instantly boss down the Charcadet, and my opponent concedes, having one of the cadets prized and no way to Super Rod back the discarded copy. Game 2 swings in the complete opposite direction. By turn 3, my opponent has 2 Ceruledge on board, with one of them having a Legacy energy attached, and despite an early Toad locking 6 fire energy in the discard, I can't see a way through the double Ceruledge, and I concede a pretty quick game 2. In game 3, after going in on my first deck search for a turn 1 Poffin, I realized that for the first time playing against Goldengo so far, I haven't prized a single piece of the Toad line. I quickly evo into a Toad and a Zoroark with a Lily ready for next turn, and my opponent evolves into a Dengos before taking a knockout with Fire Breather and Dengo, whilst evolving into a Ceruledge on the bench. I figured that I have to swing into the Ceruledge before it swings into my Toad, and so I instantly respond with a boss to bring up the bench Ceruledge, punching it for 170. My opponent bosses down a Toad, but by not prizing a single piece, I'm able to manually evolve into another copy and take out the Ceruledge. My opponent benches her second cadet, aiming to set up another Ceruledge, but with no TM Evo to set up the Ceruledge quickly, I can just boss it down and take a knockout on the single prize Charcadet. Running out of energy and with no way to take any multi-prize knockouts, my opponent tries to chase the last Toad on board, but after I Super Rod back the Toad line and TM Evo back into it, she concedes. With a record of 2, 2, and 1, we are slowly pulling this tournament run back, but I still need 3 more consecutive wins for day 2. Going into round 6, I get paired into Dragapult EX. This is the matchup I spent most of the night before practicing and testing against, and it's the primary reason that I play Psyduck, so let's see if the duck helps. Game 1 starts and I take a strong turn 1, leading Zorua and using Poffin to grab 2 more before attaching to the active and passing. Getting a turn 1 energy down in this matchup is incredible, since if you have a strong enough board on turn 2, you can just monkey 1 damage counter from the 2 generated by Itchy Pollen hitting for weakness, then scratch for the extra 20 damage to knock out a Budew. Now if your opponent brings up a second Budew, you can monkey Dory 30 damage across to just take a knockout. Evolve into Zoroark and Virtuous Flame as your cloak, giving you a super strong lead in the matchup. My opponent only finds 1 singular Dreepy, with no Poffins being found off the turn 1 Ino, and benches Latias to retreat into the Budew. With just 1 Dreepy on board though, I should hopefully be able to boss it down to deny a Pult on a future turn. I evolve my 2 bench Zoruas and choose not to evolve the active, since now I can do the Monkey Dory Shift 1 and Scratch Play. Since there's only 1 Dreepy on board, there's no immediate threat of a Dragapult, so as a result, I feel pretty confident about not evolving into the active just yet. This play also lets me take some early prizes while setting up a Monkey Dory for later on. They evolve into a Lone Cloak and find the Poffin for a second Dreepy and Budew, going back into Itchy Pollen. So now I can shift 3, boss down the only Cloak to take a knockout and go down to 3 prizes, completely denying a threat of Dragapult next turn. Unless we see a Rare Candy of course, which my opponent ended up not having. A Cloak comes back down, followed by another Budew, and whilst I'm just 1 damage short of being able to close out the game right away and I whiff the boss on a Cloak, I just take a knockout and attach to the bench Zoroark, setting up for boss Latias, giving me game on the following turn. My opponent is unable to find a way to gust around my active Zoroark, and after swinging for 200, I can just powerful rage for the knockout, taking the game. In game 2, she yet again only gets down a single Dreepy, which quickly gets bossed down on my second turn. They go in on a Poffin and quickly concedes, revealing 3 Dreepies hiding in the prize cards. With that interesting game concluded, I pulled things back to a 3-2-1 record. For the first time in this tournament, I have a positive win rate, and with 2 more wins for day 2, we are firmly back in this tournament.
Round 7 is against Charizard Noctowl. I play super defensively, establishing as many Zoroarks as possible without attacking, and I drop an early Watchtower whilst taking out the active Rotom. Maybe going in for a Watchtower this early was a mistake, but I was hoping that in doing it this early, I could completely brick my opponent and give me an easy way to sweep their board. He establishes a Charizard and takes out my benched Reshiram, to which I respond with a swing into the Charizard, which may have actually been a bad play, since since earlier on in the game, my opponent dropped a Dark Energy to retreat into Ditto early, which indicates a Monkey Dory. He pivots back into a Fan Rotom and swings to a 70, which I'm happy to respond to with a fresh Zoroark while shifting 3 onto the Charizard and getting down the Baneri to potentially knock out a Fez next turn. My opponent uses a Counter Catcher and Iono, taking a knockout on my bench Zoroark that was hit with Rotom last turn, but with no attackers left on board save Terapagos, I can safely knock out the active Charizard while slamming Watchtower Iono. My goal with the Watchtower is to prevent them from having Turo Scenario, since if they don't have it, I can knock out either the Fez or Terapagos with Lopunny that was just Iono to the bottom of the deck. My opponent can only swing into me with Terapagos, and with the deck being so thin and a newly established Zoroark on board from my bench Zorua last turn, I can easily draw through my entire deck to find Lopunny and take game 1. In game 2, my opponent leads Ditto to find a Wellspring and sets up a few Hoot Hoots and a Charizard on the bench. After checking my deck off Poffin to ensure the second copy wasn't prized, I drop an early Watchtower and use TM Evo on my side up to establish 2 Zoroarks, with a Zorua on the bench. Despite the early disruption, my opponent has a Sparkling Crystal in their hand, and they rip Torrential Pump with double energy attachments over turns 1 and 2 to take out my active Psyduck and the bench Zorua, earning them an early lead. I respond with a quick PP up Reshiram, Balloon Swing, not being able to get another Zorua down, but with my opponent's board being fairly weak, if they can't bounce the stadium, I don't really mind. My opponent finds the Crispin, retreating into a Fan Rotom and taking a swing into my Zoroark, to which I respond with an attachment to Monkey Dory, an Adrenabrain to bring the Wellspring to just 10 HP remaining, whilst taking out the active Fan Rotom. My opponent finds a Charizard, but is unable to find a way to gust around my active Zoroark and just passes. Now with a 10 HP Wellspring left on board, I could easily just take a quick knockout there to go down to 3 and swing into the Charizard, but that would open up a few problems. First, if my opponent has a Dawn, they can find Peasantipity to dry draw into a stadium. Second, that would leave my Zoroark with 10 damage and me at 3 prizes, meaning Charizard would be able to take a big 2 prize knockout. Because of this, I Adrenabrain to the active and swing for 170, keeping myself with 5 prizes and the bench locked out of a potential Fez. My opponent finds the Area 0 off a top deck and uses Noctowl to find Rare Candy and Boss, bringing up the bench Monkey Dory for a knockout whilst also setting up a Pidgeot and ripping Poffin into a new Hoot Hoot and Charmander. I see the perfect opportunity to try win the game, and I drop a Watchtower followed by an Iono to 4 cards, then find a second Monkey in my deck as well as a Dark Energy, letting me shift 10 damage off the active to take 2 prizes on the Wellspring and swing for a knockout into the active Charizard. This leaves my opponent with 3 prizes left and me at 2, where they'll now need Candy, Charizard, Briar exactly from their 4-card hand plus top deck. He can't pull together this demanding combo and concedes. From starting at 0-2-1, we have now come back to 4 wins, 2 losses and a tie, meaning the next round and the final round of Phase 1 is going to be my win and in to Phase 2. We've been on an absolute tear over the last 4 rounds, and we're looking to keep that going into round 8. My opponent flips over a Mega Kangaskhan and I flip over a super dead hand. My first turn consists of attaching an air balloon, benching a baby Toadschool, retreating and passing the turn. My opponent could be playing one of 2 decks, Mega Absol Box, which would be very bad since I didn't really test against Absol at all, or the less likely but way better Kangaskones, which is a super good matchup. He drops an instant Arven, revealing Precious Trolley and a Technical Machine Turbo Energize, plays the Trolley and grabs Bouffalont and Monkey Dories. Great, this is Kangaskones. This matchup is super good for me, so I would be happy to concede a quick game 1 and try to win back-to-back games to win the round. He attaches a Dark Energy to the active and Turbo Energizes, establishing double Monkey Dory, and I top deck a Zoroark EX. I needed something good here, since my hand literally could not be worse. I announce a trade, discarding a Mega Lopunny, and draw into both copies of my Super Rod. Just when I thought I got bailed out by the top deck, Zoroark decided that was all the luck I was going to get this turn. No energy, no draw supporters, not even a way to find more basics. I pass the turn back, but by some stroke of good luck, my opponent is unable to piece together an attack, attaching a Fire Energy for turn and passing things back over. Trade gives me Lily, and we are so back, baby. An Air Balloon, Energy, Technical Machine Turbo Energize and Buddy Poffin lets me establish 2 more Zoroarks on board, whilst finally getting started on my energy attachments. My opponent finds an Arven to grab the Earthen Vessel, giving the 3rd energy and a Bravery Charm onto the active, but with no way to gust around my Zoroark, he chooses to just pass. If he isn't planning on swinging into my Zoroark at all, I don't need to worry as much about being ahead on energy, so I simply attach to the active Zoroark, boss down a Monkey Dory, rip the Artisan and get me a Reshiram, taking the first prize of the game. In response, my opponent simply bosses down my Reshiram and takes a knockout, letting me know quite clearly how he wants to play this game out. I assume he has a Moltres because of the Fire Energy on the active, so the game plan is probably boss around my Zoroark as many times as possible, then chip away at Zoroark with Moltres, letting him take a big knockout into it with Kangaskhan. I want to play a similar game, where I boss around the Kanga for as long long as possible to chase down the energy attachments. But there are two key areas that make this matchup so good for me. First of all, I can play boss more consistently. With a power pad and 3 copies, I can already play 5 boss in a single game, but with a better draw engine than him, I can also find my bosses more consistently. Whilst on the topic of draw, the second big advantage is I have disruption. Kangaskhan is a normal type, meaning a late game Ino and Team Rocket's Watchtower can let me make a play for game, shutting off Curly Wall and run errand, which gives me all the time I need to go through a Kangaskhan. I boss down a Monkey Dory, re-establishing a Reshiram to go down to 4, and at this point my opponent drops the counter stadium to my Artisan through Snowy Mountain, bossing down the Reshiram, going down to 4 prizes each. Whilst getting rid of my Artisan is strong to stop my easy access to Reshiram, Snowy Mountain could actually end up being super good for me. See, the active Kangaskhan has a Bravery Charm attached, meaning it has 350 HP. Swinging with Reshiram twice will do 340 damage, just shy of a knockout. But if I establish a Monkey Dory under Snowy Mountain, well now I have 2 damage counters to hold on to, meaning I can drop these 2 counters onto the Kanga, and with no Monkey Dory established, my opponent will hopefully struggle to heal his active, which should help me win. For now though, I Super Rod back double Reshiram using a Nest Ball to search one out, and I drop a 3rd boss to target down a Bouffalante. My opponent bosses down a Reshiram yet again, going down to 3 prizes each, which is the perfect opportunity for me to make a play for game, since I can win with 1 knockout and he can't. I bench the Monkey Dory, dropping a Dark Energy onto it, with Snowy Mountain generating 2 counters for me to work with, bench a Reshiram, and use Secret Box to get me Ino and Watchtower. The Watchtower is going to turn off Curly Wall and run errand, and the Ino to 3 is going to hopefully stop him from drawing into a boss or Monkey Dory. He draws nothing off the Ino, and realizes that even if he flips double heads for a knockout, I have another Zuruk and damage on the Monkey Dory to win next turn, so he concedes to go into game 2. In game 2, my opponent prizes their trolley, and so all he can do on turn 1 is Arven for Nest Ball and Turbo Energize off the active Bouffalante, charging up the Kangaskhan found off the Nest Ball. Over on my side, I have 3 Zuruks established by turn 2, but by whiffing energy on turn 1, I'm not able to knock out the Bouffalante immediately. My opponent finds another Nest Ball and Air Balloon off Arven, establishing the Curly Wall, and decides to just swing into the active Zuruk, hoping for the best in such a bad matchup. He lands on Tails, and with no Bravery Charm, that 400 damage Powerful Rage, minus 60 for Curly Wall, is going to be more than enough for a quick one-hit knockout. I find the energy and attach the active Zuruk, retaliating with a knockout into the active Kangaskhan. Not being able to one-shot a Zuruk means this game is pretty much over for my opponent, who concedes a quick game 2. 5 wins straight means we're into day 2 with a 5-2-1 record, coming back from the 0-2-1 start. Now that we're into the second phase though, I still have 6 more rounds to play out, with 1 more happening today. In round 9, I'm up against Terrazard. I choose to play slow early game using TM Evo to set up 3 Zuruks and a Lopunny. He bosses the Lopunny to swing for 180, but I can't find the Turo, and so I just pivot into a Zuruk and boss to knock out the bench Charmander. He quick searches for a second boss, taking out my Lopunny, but with 2 boss down already, that should leave him with at most 1 gusty option in Prime Catcher. I swing into the active Charizard, but he doesn't find a way to hit my Zuruk back since it would open up an easy boss KO on Pidgeot, and so he just passes back using Night Stretcher to recover the Charmander. I take a knockout into the active Charizard, going down to 3, and he finds a Wellspring, Crispin and Sparkling Crystal to Torrential Pump and knock out my bench Monkey Dory. I re-establish Monkey Dory to drop 30 onto the Wellspring and Air Balloon into a fresh Zuruk that isn't just going to get one tapped by Charizard before swinging at 170, leaving the Wellspring with just 10 health left. He has yet another Crispin, using Torrential Pump for a second time to knock out my Monkey Dory again, but at this point I see a clear line to win the game. He's at 1 prize, so I drop the Watchtower and Ino, super rodding back a Monkey that instantly gets re-established, before manual retreating into a 3rd Zuruk, using my Counter Catcher to bring out the active Charizard, and swinging for 170, shifting 30 damage onto a Hoot Hoot, just in case the Wellspring gets Turoed up or something like that, so that I will have another avenue to win the game on the next turn. Off the Ino to 1 and a top deck, my opponent has a Dawn, which finds them a Chien-Pao to bump the stadium, but with no Gust remaining, he just swings into me with Charizard, knowing I have game next turn regardless. I shift 30 onto the Wellspring, taking a knockout, then Zuruk knocks out the Charizard, which secures me the 4 prize turn and the game. In game 2, my opponent completely bricks. With no way to search out a Terra Pokemon, Rotom finds double Hoot Hoot in the Pidgey and takes out the active Zura with an Area 0 and Jet energy, but I pull ahead, going down to 3 prizes left by getting a fast Zoroark and taking out the Rotom, then 2 Charmeleons. Usually you would want to sit at 3 prizes for as long as possible in this matchup, since going down to 2 means Burning Darkness is a clean KO onto your Zoroarks. But with such a big lead, even if he does have a Charizard, I can just boss 2 single prizes for the game, so I go down to 2 on the active Hoothoot. He whiffs on the Charizard, and I power pad back double boss, bringing up the last Charmander for a knockout. Literally immediately after I take out his only Charmander, my opponent shows me Candy Zard from the top deck, before conceding the game with no way back in, which puts me to a 6-2-1 record and rounds out day 1 after an incredible 6-game win streak.
Good morning everyone, it is Sunday, which means phase 2 of the Birmingham Regional Championships. We're going to be playing for 5 rounds today, followed by asymmetrical top cut, and I need to win all 5 of my Swiss rounds today to have a good chance at making it to that cut bracket. Winning 4 and losing 1 should hopefully get me into the top 32, which would mean $1,000 in cash prizing and a lot of booster packs. So round 10 is called, and I get to play against my 3rd golden go of the tournament. I'm going first and rip a Poffin for double Zorua on turn 1, passing things over with 3 on board. My opponent rips Arven for a Poffin of his own, using Earthen Vessel and Artisan to Lunar Cycle and attach to the active Solrock, taking a knockout. I use the Artisan to search out a baby Toad, noting that one of them is hiding in the prize cards, whilst evolving into double Zoroark, attaching an Evo and energy to the active and ripping a Lily. After laying out 8 cards, I look at my new hand to see both copies of Big Toad sitting there. All I can do is just pass the turn over, being unable to Evo into a Toad. My opponent capitalizes on my miss sequence by bossing down the baby Toad and taking a knockout, and for the rest of the game, whilst I make an effort to try and establish new Toads and make them stick by using Iono as many times as possible, my opponent is able to chase the Toad down 2 more times before taking 1 more big final knockout onto a Zoroark for the game. This obviously isn't an ideal way to start day 2, but the miss sequence of using Lily that aggressively probably isn't a mistake I'm going to make again after that. In game 2, my opponent gets super aggressive with the Lunar Cycles to try to draw out of a bad starting hand, putting 4 fighting energy in the discard early, whilst attaching a Dark to the Monkey Dory instead of a fighting to Solrock, which could have helped him take early prize cards. I swing into a Goldengo for 170, choosing not to bench a baby Toad with 1 prized and me whiffing the Evo, which leaves him responding with 6 energy into the active Zoroark for a knockout. I Evo into a Toedscruel, which quickly gets bossed down, whilst he super odds back more energy to be able to go through a second Toad should I find the Evo. Now though, I prize my 30M Evo and a second baby Toad, so after Evoing back into Big Toad for the second time, if he can find the boss to take it out, I could be in trouble. Naturally, he finds the boss and removes Toad from play, which puts me into a super bad spot. I super odd back the Toad line and Poffin to bring back out the baby Toad, then I Iono him to just 2 cards, with only 2 Goldengos on board. I'm hoping that by gusting down the Fezandipity and swinging into it, I can hopefully buy a turn to re-establish Toad, but this is looking super unlikely. I do just that, CCing into Fez and swinging, and after he draws up to 5 in hand, he just passes things over, whiffing on any of the 3 copies of Superior he has in deck. He later told me that I Iono'd all 3 remaining copies to the bottom of the deck, and with no way to shuffle after I bounced the Artisan for Watchtower, he wasn't able to find anything. I manually evolve into Big Toad, locking 9 energy in the discard, and with 2 prizes remaining for him to take and no energy left to do that, he concedes to go to game 3. In game 3, I get double Toad down with the turn 2 Technical Machine Evolution, but he has a terrible start, needing to burn 3 Lunar Cycles before getting a Goldengo onto the board. He manages to boss down and take out both Toads in back-to-back turns, but after I super back a 2-1 line of Toad, Poffin into both and Evo back into 1, he concedes with Super Rod and a handful of energy hanging out in the prize cards. I should probably say that I was still on 5 prizes, and with 2 minutes left, my opponent could have absolutely played into a tie in game 3, so it was really awesome to not see him stall out the game and force a tie. In round 11 we're playing against Pulsard. This is a matchup that, to be honest, I have no clue how to play, and in hindsight I played this set pretty badly as a result. In game 1, I get to use Boss's Orders to take out the Onitra Cloak on turn 3 from going first, whilst using Monkey Dory to take out the Badoo on the same turn to go down to 4 prizes. My opponent uses TM Evo immediately after to set up double Dracloaks though, whilst having a Charmander and Charmeleon on board. I burn my second boss to take out the Dracloak, which was probably incorrect, getting 2 more Zoruas down after being freed from item lock with 2 Zoroarks left on board. My opponent capitalizes on this, bossing down a Zorua whilst dropping a Holuka to put 1 onto the second Zorua and the charged up Zoroark, then wiping both Zoruas off the board whilst playing Stamp on the same turn. I swing into the Dragapult, and with no energy on the Charizard, my opponent has to just swing back into me and spread some damage onto my bent Zoruas that I super rod Poffined back out. I take a knockout into the Pult, going down to just 1 prize
minutes left whilst getting down 3rd Zoroark to prepare for the inevitable Iono to 1. My opponent finds Candy Zard and an Iono, sending me down to just 1 card, and takes a knockout, meaning I need an energy to charge up Zoroark and a boss to win this turn. After ripping for 2 trades, I draw into everything I need, and boss down a Dracloak on the bench to take game 1. I'm going to be honest here, after finishing this round I was in a really weird headspace, so instead of writing out full matchup notes, I literally just wrote, "Do game 2 later please," which I never actually did, and this script is actually being written long enough after the tournament that I genuinely cannot remember what happened fully in this round. What I can tell you though is that in game 2 I started off pretty well, but so did my opponent, getting down 2 Dracloaks, a Charmander and a Charmeleon, as well as a Budew and Monkey Dory, whilst I get down 3 Zoroarks and a Monkey of my own. I super aggressively target down the Charmeleon in back-to-back turns to go down to 4 prizes, but this burns 2 copies of Boss's Orders early, which isn't a good idea. Also, it's probably best to go for the Dracloaks in hindsight if you are going to boss. My opponent gets a Charizard out regardless, and after Phantom Diving a Zora and Monkey Dory, I swing back to stay at 4 and get Jet headbutted. I take out the Pult, going down to 2 prizes, but I get hit with a Charizard Iono and I can't draw out of it, being unable to re-establish a Monkey and getting swept. In game 3, I remember pretty clearly what happened though. I hard bricked and found a few Zoras early, but after dropping a Lily on turn 1, I can't find any Zoroarks or TM Evos or supporters. I'm left just draw passing for a few turns until the Dragapult hits the board, and from there isn't really much I can do. An unfortunate loss here, and to be honest a bit of a skill issue, means I'm now out of top cut contention, but winning the next 3 rounds will hopefully still get me cash. Remember how I hit back-to-back Ceruledge in day 1? Yeah, I do. Pretty crazy stuff, right? Ceruledge being literally 3% of the room means there's no way I hit another one, right? I mean, the archetype is literally 1.6% of decks in phase 2, so surely I'm never hitting a 3rd Ceruledge, right? So round 3 starts, and guess what my opponent flips over? Yeah, they drop a Charcadet, and on turn 2, they bin off 5 energy through research, whilst dropping 2 Marth from Lunacycles. I get down an early Toad, and actually pull ahead on energy attachments pretty well, but when he's one-tapping my Zoroarks by turn 3, there's not much I can do. I try to Iono him to 2, countercatch with the Fez and knock out with Lopunny, after he takes out 2 Zoroarks to go down to 2 prizes, but my opponent raw draws the research and is able to manual retreat to Ceruledge into another, getting 15 energy gone for a quick game 1. Game 2 is much of the same, but this time I'm struggling for energy, and I use Cleffer to try find a Lily. He gets 2 knockouts with Solrock early and quickly puts 15 energy in the discard, meaning even if I can get into a Lopunny, it will just get one shot immediately. I couldn't find any creative ways to break through his board, and so I scoop a quick round. I have to apologise for how little I've talked about this round, but there really isn't much to talk about. Opponent bin lots of energy, blow up all my guys, GG well played. Regardless, we're sitting at 7 wins, 4 losses and a tie after 2 back-to-back losses, which means I'm probably out of contention for even a top 64 finish, and with my horrible resistance from losing my first 2 rounds, I probably can't even make top 128. Even though I'm not feeling too good about the day, I decide to keep playing to see where we finish. We're against Terrazard in round 13, and this was a pretty funny set for me. In game 1, I drop a Poff and an Artisan to get out all 4 Zoruas going first, before my opponent responds with a Jet Energy onto Fan Rotom to take out one of them. I set up 3 Zoroarks, getting a Monkey Dory into play with an energy on the active Zoroark from my first turn. This probably wasn't the correct play, but I was anticipating a swing for 70 from the Fan Rotom, and so instead of putting myself in a position where my Zoroark could get knocked out if I KO'd the Rotom, I wanted some damage to be able to work with in exchange for taking an extra turn. He takes a turn to quick search into Area 0 and Poff him for double Duskull, choosing to just pass the turn after retreating into a Charizard, and I respond with the Psyduck and Buneary, as well as a punch for 170. I actually choose to retreat into a healthy Zoroark here to conserve the 40 damage on the previously active Zoroark for later. 40 damage is super important, since it lets you swing for 170 into Fez, whilst Adrenabraining 30 onto it simultaneously, then next turn you can knock out Fez with Monkey damage to take multi-prize turns. So I'm not going to Adrenabrain this turn, just in case he gets a Fez down. My opponent finds a massive combo turn, getting Klefki, Jet into the Klefki, Candy Dusknoir to take out the Reshiram, and a Boss to knock out the bench Zoroark, going down to 2 prizes, whilst I still have 5 left to take. Unfortunately for him though, this aggressive play means he didn't get a chance to establish a second Charizard, and with the active Zard in range of a knockout this turn, I can make a big disruption play. I drop the Watchtower, Nestball into a new Reshiram, I know to 2 cards, and I take a knockout into the Charizard. My opponent finds a Dawn for Fezandipity, Charizard and Noctowl, then rips Candy Zard off the Fez. Instead of attacking with Zard though, he swings into me for 120 with Pidgeot, bouncing the Watchtower. However, in doing this, he can only get 1 energy onto the Charizard. Because of this, I rip an Iono to 2, 2, pivot into a healthy Zerok and swing for 170 into his Pidgeots. With no Hoot Hoots on board, my opponent needs a boss and Night Stretcher for energy, which they can't find, and so they just choose to quick set for a boss, taking out the Psyduck with Blustery Wind. I have a very demanding turn here. I want to get my Psyduck back, as well as a counter catcher to bring up Fez, my last Ino on Watchtower, which should give me the best odds of winning. My opponent also super odds back double energy and a Dusknoir, which pressures me to get Psyduck as soon as possible, which means I don't lose to Candy Dusk into my Reshiram or Dusclot's Prime Catcher, KO my bench Zerok with damage from Blustery Wind. My first trade finds the counter catcher and an Ino, then after super odding back the Duck, Ino finds a raw Psyduck and a Watchtower. I counter catcher the Fez, shift 30 onto it and swing for 170, leaving my opponent with just one card off Iono, one card from the top deck and no quick search because of the Watchtower. My opponent can't find game and just prime catches into Reshiram. I don't have any air balloon remaining in the deck, so after I Turo the Reshiram I just promote and choose not to rebench the Reshi, so that I don't lose to an extra gusting option. My opponent just draw passes, and I can now bench the Reshiram, shift 10 onto Fez for the knockout, then boss the Pidgeots to take a knockout, finishing off a long game 1. In game 2, my opponent bricks hard. Poffin finds double Charmander, and Rotom gets a Hoothoot, Pidgey and Noctowl. But after I Evo into Zerox, he just attaches Jet to Rotom, plays Area 0, and takes a knockout into the active Zora. I promote a Zoroark and Evo to get a third Zoroark onto board, and he just draws and attacks. I attach to the active and knock out the Rotom, but my opponent just draws and passes. I boss a Charmander, and he draws and passes. I boss the second and only remaining Charmander, take a knockout, and he draws and passes. I take out the active Pidgey, he draws and passes. This continues for a few more turns, and with no Charmanders on board, I'm able to just keep taking single prize knockouts until I eventually win the game and the round, going to an 8-4-1 record. Round 14 is the final round of the tournament. I'm 2-2 in games today, so winning the last round to finish day 2 with a positive record would be pretty nice. We're against Golden Go, and he bins off 2 energy with Lunar Cycle to get into the game, taking an early prize onto Zora with Solrock. With one Baby Toad prized, I get Big Toad and some Zoroarks out from manual attachments, whilst taking out the Solrock to put 3 energy in the discard early. Seeing the Toad, my opponent decides to bin off 6 energy regardless to take out the active Zoroark. At the time, I was pretty confused, but with 2 boss and a prime prized, it was a pretty necessary play to make. My opponent eats a hit from a Zoroark into Dengo, choosing to just draw past the following turn, and after I take out the active Dengo to go down to 3, he plays Cramorant to knock out the bench Toad. I super back the Toad line, Poffin into the Baby Toad, bench Baby Toad I just found off my prize cards, and Evo to get double Toads onto the board. My opponent bosses down one of the new big Toads and takes a knockout to go down to 1 with Cram, but I only him to 1 cards, and with just 1 Dengo on board and only 1 energy left to work with, my opponent can't find the Super Rod in time, and I'm able to take a 2-hit knockout onto the active Golden Go after taking out the Cramorant, taking a game 1. In game 2, I get double Toad from TM Evo on my second turn, whilst my opponent isn't able to find any early prizes with Solrock. My opponent knocks out a Zoroark quickly to go down to 4 prizes, dropping 6 energy early, and I bring up a new Zoroark and swing into him for 170. My opponent bosses down a bench Toad to take a knockout, and I respond with a knockout into the Dengo, with my opponent having 9 energy in the discard from Make It Rains, as well as 1 from the knocked out Goldingo. My opponent finds Cramorant to take out the next bench Toad, but I manage to get the Baby Toad back down last turn, manual evolving and knocking out the Cram. Super Rod gets back Solrock, Cram and a fighting energy, then Solrock boss swings 70 into Big Toad. I find Air Balloon, knocking out the Solrock, and with no energy left, my opponent concedes. Finishing with a 9-4-1 record means we're bubbling out of top 128, finishing 140th out of 2,344 players. It's not an ideal run, hitting 3 separate Serral Edges, and it secures me 60 crucial championship points towards the Worlds invite. As of right now, I'm kind of behind on my Worlds invites. We're going to need some big finishes towards the late half of the season. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you want to see more of these videos, you can go watch this one on screen, where I entered a Pokemon tournament with a deck that everyone else thought was completely dead.